right, hello everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Circle Time Magazine. Yay. We are on location at Kindering in Bellevue, Washington today. We're going to talk to some experts about how to support children's behavior in the classroom and in childcare settings.
Yeah, Kristen, you know what it's like when you've been doing all you can to support a child's behavior, right, and you just are trying to figure out what you can do.
Right. You know something isn't quite right. You know you want to do more. You maybe think about it on your way to work in the car. You think about it before you go to bed. You're just really thinking, and you might not know what to do, right?
Right, and sometimes knowing what to do next is the hardest part. So we are here to talk to our guests about this.
That's right.
Thank you all for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Will you all introduce yourselves? Enrica, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Enrica Hampton. I provide internal management for some of our early learning programs here at Kindering. And I'm also an early care and education consultant. And so a big part of my job as a consultant is going out to early care and education settings, such as child care and preschools, when there are questions and concerns being raised about a young child's behavior, as well as to provide resources and make referrals, just to name a few things that I do as part of my role.
Just a little bit.
Right.
Right there.
Great. And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Foster, and I am the Early Intervention Senior Manager here in Bellevue. And so my job is to support the managers who are supporting the direct service providers who are actually in the home and in the child care working with children receiving early intervention.
Excellent. Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Fisher. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, an infant mental health therapist, a supervisor, and a trainer, and I'm mostly engaged in a program called Cherish, which stands for Children Encouraged by Relationships in Secure Homes, and it's an infant mental health program specifically for children in the foster care system. And today I'm hoping to be able to bring a perspective of social emotional development, particularly in the context of relationships, regulation, and trauma.
Perfect. Great. We're so happy you're all here. Let's just get right into thinking about, I might be concerned. I am concerned about a child in my care. What are some things that I can do first? Where do I start?
I think the biggest thing is to trust your gut instincts. You know children. You are around children daily in your work, and you know when something just doesn't feel quite right. So, and when you think about behavior is observable, it's measurable, it's an action, it's something you can do. The moment you start having questions about a child's development or behavior, as I always say, grab the nearest piece of paper and a pencil or a crayon or a marker, whatever you have, and write down what you are seeing. Okay. And I stress that word seeing. So be objective. Avoid labeling what you see. So for example, Thomas is mean versus Thomas kicked Jonathan 5 times in the block area. You can sort of see the difference there.
Yeah.
One tool or strategy that you can use when you start to have questions about a child's behavior is sort of to do some reflection. And I always like to use a tool that kind of starts off as, when you see a behavior, think about. So see a behavior, think about development. Is it on track? Is this child meeting their developmental milestones? When you see a behavior, think about basic needs. Is this child hungry, tired? Has there been a significant life stressor like a death or divorce? When you see behavior, think about environment. Number of people in the room, interaction patterns, room arrangement. When you see a behavior, think about sensory sensitivities and self-regulation. So this might be the 4-year-old child who you're noticing just can't keep his hands and his body to himself. He's constantly touching all his friends around him. He's bumping into peers when he's in line and at circle. And all of those behaviors are impacting his social success with his friends, But the reason for those behaviors might be related to sensory sensitivities and self-regulation. It's important when you see a behavior to always think about temperament. Temperament, sort of your inborn style, personality, it influences how behavior looks and the intensity of response. Think about trauma. What is this child's history? And if you don't know, that's a great place to start asking questions to a family to learn more about that child's history, to help inform what you're doing in the classroom. Other things I think about when you're seeing a behavior, ask yourself about the child's experience. This might be the very first time this child has been in a group care setting.
It's all new.
It's all new.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so some of those behaviors might be truly related to, I'm still learning what I'm supposed to be doing in this setting. It's also really important when you're seeing a behavior to really step back and think about culture, your own culture and that of the child and the family. Our cultural values influence how we see and interpret behavior and what we might consider normal. It's also really important to reflect on and be very aware of implicit bias, our attitudes that affect our understanding, our actions, our decisions in an unconscious way. Other things you think about when you're seeing a behavior, ask yourself, how often is this happening? So frequency, how intense is this? How long are these behaviors happening? And there are simple ways to collect that information to get a clearer picture of the how often, the whens, the wheres, the time of day, et cetera, behavior is occurring. Yeah, yes, and that's where taking, writing things down and taking those notes might lead you to see, yeah, these behaviors always seem to be occurring around transitions. That can give you some good clues as to what to do next, or maybe what do I do differently to support that transition for that child. And another thing to always ask yourself when you're seeing the behaviors, is that behavior interfering? And I always like to link back to that 4-year-old in the example I gave around the sensory sensitivities, who was having a real hard time keeping his hands and his body to himself, and it was impacting his social success with his peers. That is suggesting that those behaviors are interfering in this child's success in the classroom. Some additional things that you can do when you have concerns about a child's behavior is, if you're working as a team, compare notes with your colleague. Talk to your program director if you have one. Try some new strategies based off of all your observations. Doing those types of things can really help determine the next steps and get you prepared to have that conversation with a family about the concerns that you have.
How do you have these conversations with families, especially about a child's behavior?
Right, that can be hard, right, to bring this kind of thing up.
It is. Yeah, the conversations like this aren't easy, but they are important.
Absolutely.
They really are important, and these types of conversations are a part of your job. And so some things to actually think about even before you have that conversation, thinking about meeting space and location, privacy. These are private conversations. This is confidential. This is very sensitive information that you're sharing with family. So really taking a look at that and making sure that you have a space where you can hold a private conversation. Think about the time of day that works best for the family. And I always like to add, make sure you give the time to hold the discussion. I think sometimes, when you're really busy, you're thinking, okay, 5 o'clock, we're going to have this conversation, and 5:15, we're going to be done. And that's not really giving time to hold the discussion. So you really need to think that through. Have your notes with you. It's okay to bring your notes. That's why you did all of that work in advance. Another strategy to use is really try to use an approach that sparks a conversation as much as possible. So I'll give a really simple example. So you might start off by saying something like, Jonathan is such a delight to have in the classroom. He has got so much to say. You know, sometimes I have a hard time understanding everything that he is saying. And I notice his friends have a hard time understanding him too. What do you see at home? You've led with this child's strengths, and then you've moved into the areas that you're starting to have some question about. And in so doing, opening the door to have some back and forth conversation with the family.
Right, and asking, what do you think? You know, what are you seeing at home? I like that, you know, giving them that chance.
Right, absolutely. You know, make sure to describe the behaviors that you're seeing. So again, avoid labeling. You know, another thing to always be doing is ask if the pediatrician or healthcare provider has ever expressed concerns. That's important information. Hopefully, because you've opened that door for that back and forth conversation, you're naturally finding out what strategies have been working well at home. You're really doing that because you're approaching this as a team. When you have concerns and you're thinking about recommending that a family take some additional steps, make sure you have those resources available to provide to the family during your meeting. And then in addition, always suggest that they talk to their pediatrician or their healthcare provider.
So what if you have your observation, you have your meeting with the family, you're very prepared in what you're wanting to say, but what if there's some resistance on the family's part? You know, a family's maybe not ready to act on this right away. How do you handle that as a teacher, caregiver?
This could also be a situation where a family wasn't quite prepared even or expecting to receive that type of information. But you know, sometimes a family is not comfortable seeking outside services, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. And it is a parent's right to elect not to move forward with your recommendations. They're absolute right. There are some things that you can do. You know, as a team, you can generate some additional strategies and maybe try those out for a period of time, and be very intentional about setting another time where you're getting back together as a team to reassess. You know, take a look at, okay, we've tried these strategies now. This amount of time has passed. What changes have we seen as a result of implementing these new strategies here in the classroom? And what are you seeing at home? If the concerns are still present, talk about those concerns. Let the family know that in order to best support their child, that you as the teacher really need some additional information to help. So sometimes making that slight shift in focus and putting it on yourself, saying, I need some additional help. I need support to best meet the needs of your child. That can make a big difference. That combined with time. So you took some additional time. You tried some strategies. Time has elapsed. And sometimes that combined with putting it on yourself too can make a difference. A family might be in a different readiness place because of that passage of time.
Right, okay.
The reality is this is hard. You know, this is a hard job. What you're doing is you're trying to encourage a family to take some steps that they maybe were not expecting to be taking.
Right, no one's expecting that.
You're sort of, we always like to say here at Kindering, you're sometimes sending a family on a journey, an unexpected journey.
Yes.
But just know, as a teacher, you have planted some very important seeds. And, you know, sometimes it really takes hearing information multiple times by different people before a family is ready to take that next step. And I'm going to bring out this lion here for a moment. So this is Courage. Yeah, and this Kindering has a mascot, so the lion is our mascot. His name is Courage, and the reason we do have this lion as a mascot is because that is a huge step for a family to take. That's a courageous next step for a family to be taking to enter the doors of an early intervention agency or entering the doors of a school district because of concerns about their child's behavior and development.
Right, right.
Courage.
Love it.
Yeah.
So now that you've had this conversation with the family and maybe they really are ready to consider seeking outside services, what happens then? How can you talk to families about that?
Yeah, so it depends on the age of the child, obviously. There are a couple of different paths. So if the child is birth to 3, they would contact their local early intervention agency. If the child is 3 to 5, they would just give their local school, their elementary school, a call, or contact their local school district.
Okay.
And it's really important to remember that a family does not need a doctor's referral to contact either early intervention or the school district.
Okay.
They simply need to call up and say, I have concerns about my child's development or behavior, and I'd like my child evaluated to see if they qualify for services, either early intervention or school district services. Hopefully that streamlines things for families to be able to know that they can call directly. And so what the agency or the school district would do is they will complete an evaluation of the child to determine if the child is eligible for services. And these evaluations are at no cost to the family. So that is also important to keep in mind.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
And eligibility is based on a developmental delay using standardized testing, or the therapists who are providing the testing can also determine that based on informed clinical opinion, the child would qualify for services.
So when families will probably have questions about this whole process, right? The whole time through, right? And teachers as well, because a lot of teachers, of course, are not, in this sort of early intervention world. So, what can you tell teachers about sort of the details of this whole process? What can a teacher do?
So I can speak to early intervention since that's where I work. So once a child is found to be eligible, a family resources coordinator, or FRC, will work with the family to develop an individualized family service plan, or IFSP. And that will address a child's physical, cognitive, communication, social, emotional, and adaptive areas of development. And services on the IFSP can include, we have multiple services. There can be special instruction, family training and counseling and home visits, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. It's also important to keep in mind that with early intervention, the services should occur in the child's natural environment. So in the home or in the child care, wherever the child is spending their time. The providers would go to that location and provide those services. As a child begins to get closer to age 3, they would move from early intervention to the school district, and the FRC helps them with that transition process. And they can help provide support either as they transition to a special education preschool, if that's necessary, or other community services. And also it's important to note that these services, because it's a federal program, these services are provided at hopefully a cost that the families can participate in or can afford.
It sounds there's a lot of steps to the referral process. It takes a little bit of time for that to happen. But those behaviors those didn't stop just because the referral process is going on. Those things are still happening. So in the meantime, what can teachers and families be doing to support that behavior, even though services haven't quite started yet?
The number one thing to think about as a provider is how are your needs getting met? So I reflect on your own needs, your self-care. We talk a lot in infant mental health about something called a parallel process. So you can't give what you're not getting. So in order to help regulate children in your classroom, you need to have your own amount of regulation. And that just doesn't happen because you want it to. It's actually a practice. You have to have time. Yeah, you have to have time to stop and think, how is this work affecting me? How am I affecting my classroom? What do I need that I'm not getting from my manager or director or whomever provides support to you? So it's the first most important thing you do. Take care of yourself.
Because it's all about you.
It is. It is. It's the oxygen mask thing. You have to take care of yourself first. Also reflect on any triggers that this child and this behavior might be eliciting in you. You know, is there something about that behavior that reminds you of another kid that you really struggled with, or something in your own background? And as Enrica mentioned, implicit bias, it's hard to come, because it's unconscious, you're not going to come to that probably on your own. You have to talk to someone else and reflect with someone else about, you know, something about this kid just gets my goat or something. And you don't necessarily get there until you have a chance to process and think about it.
Okay, processing is huge in this.
Yeah, yeah, and we don't have a lot of time for that, so you have to make time. Like, this is not, nobody's going to say, now's your processing time. I'll take your classroom while you do some processing.
It's not happening.
No, it's not going to happen. Okay.
So while you're waiting for services to start, and if it's early intervention or even school district, it's not too long, hopefully, but make a plan to support this child's needs. Relationships are key. So we talk about connecting before correcting. Does this child feel safe? Does he or she trust you? These are things to think about and how those might be affecting the behaviors. Consider the environment. Is it overstimulating? We talked about transitions a little bit. How are those being done? Is there a primary person that this child really connects with? And can you promote that relationship? And, you know, Miss Susie's going to be here in an hour. She's been asking how you're doing. You know, something to just kind of help with their sense of belonging. Basic needs, Enrica mentioned this too, is there enough food at home? Do they have a home? Are there community services to help this family that you could start engaging before the intervention starts? Sensory needs, you know, it's large muscle movement is really regulating. So is there more jumping that can happen in the classroom? Is there more swinging that can happen? Thinking about that, adding more of that into the child's day. Simply communicating. So when you're dysregulated, this is kids, this is us, this is anybody, you can't process big words or long sentences. Your brain's not working like that. So you consider using pictures, employing singing or music. You know, I'm sure the Barney cleanup song, like things like that are easier than talking to kids in big sentences. And then have some tools in your back pocket. So there's a lot of mindfulness activities now for kids, things like breathing and yoga and progressive muscle relaxation. A lot of those are findable online or in books. There's also online the Circle of Security, which is a really great way of looking at attachment in kids. They have some videos for free online that are good for you to watch, maybe families, and show them to families. There are books. Dr. Daniel Siegel is someone I recommend. He has Parenting from the Inside Out, which is good for parents and for providers.
What are some examples of services that might be available to a family? What could they expect?
I'm going to have an obvious bias as an infant mental health therapist, but one service that can be accessed is infant mental health therapy. When you're interviewing a therapist to see if they have that level of training, some things to listen for are child-parent psychotherapy training, promoting first relationships, circle of security, like I've mentioned, parent-child interaction therapy, which some people think of as the earbud intervention, trust-based relational intervention therapy, and that's Dr. Karen Purvis in Texas. That's something that she's associated with, and she has lots of free videos and stuff online. So if a therapist knows about some of these things I'm mentioning, that's a good sign. Some early intervention centers offer infant mental health or social work services like Kindering, and some areas of the country, mental health agencies and early intervention are co-located. So that's a way to access that. And social work is one of the services that is part of early intervention. So play therapy is another option, best really for kids 3 and up. Occupational therapy or speech therapy, especially if the behavior, if there's a sense that it's regulation or sensory based, or if it's based on communication needs. So there's a lot of, with little kids, the different areas of development overlap so much. So different providers can provide intervention around behavioral concerns. If the family is involved in the child welfare system, there's something called family preservation services, and these are really intense. The state pays for them and comes in and kind of helps the family with how do you run a home? How do you balance a checkbook? How do you manage all there is to manage? And we know there's a lot to manage. For the children themselves, some things you might not think about, like yoga, martial arts, sports such as soccer, basketball. These are better for slightly 3 to 5 probably, but just a way to get their needs met, in addition to what's happening in the childcare setting. And then there's social skills groups. Often those are also better for kids closer to school age, but there's a variety of groups you can access. Often they target children who are perhaps on the autism spectrum. So, so those are some ideas of things.
Yeah, that's a great list of.
Yeah, and it's helpful to know, if you're going to have this conversation with families, you can give them some ideas of what those services might look like.
Yeah.
Right? Play groups sound really friendly.
Yeah,
And everybody can be there for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
So as we wrap up here, what are some key messages you want folks to walk away with?
Yes, I'd like to sort of leave 3 takeaways. So one being, children. So when something is not quite right. So trust those gut instincts. Another is using that reflective tool. When you see a behavior, think. That tool can really help guide your decision making and help to inform those next steps. And then finally, there are going to be times when a family will elect not to follow through on your recommendations. And just know that, one, that's a parent's right, but also that you have really planted some seeds to get that process started, because sometimes it just takes time for a family to be comfortable taking those next steps.
Right. Okay. Good.
Yeah, I also really appreciated the idea of giving enough time for the meeting. Coming with the approach that I'm trying to understand more about this and I need help to support your child. It takes some of the pressure off of it and I think helps form a stronger collaboration.
Absolutely.
That's great. What about you, Sarah? What are your takeaways?
I would really like for people to know that early intervention services can be key to a child's development, and especially narrowing that gap as children are young and their brains are developing, and this is really the time to catch these kids and get them the support and services that they need. Also, because early intervention is a federal program, it is open to everyone, and it should be accessible to everyone. And then finally, you do not need a referral to contact your local early intervention program or school district for support for your child.
Right. If you have a concern, just
Call.
call it.
Yes.
Call up.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Good.
It's amazing how many people don't know that.
Yeah.
Really, it's really, we need to get that word out there.
I agree. I think that's great.
So my takeaway is definitely self-care, which really should be called survival care, because it's not optional. And it's not selfish. Sometimes I think people hear self-care and they think, oh, that's selfish to think about me.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah,
For
but
myself.
actually you don't have time not to do it, because you can't do your job without having regulation, without having that chance to connect with yourself, reflect on what you're doing. It's amazing how little we put into that. So this is not going to be offered to you. You have to really plan for it on a daily basis. And ask yourself the questions: am I getting what I need to do this work? The support that I need? And if you're not, seek that out. Let your director know you need more. This is so important for your longevity, and we need you to stay. The kids need you to stay. So, do what you can to take care of yourself every day.
All right, well, thank you so much, all three of you, for being a part of our special edition to our Circle Time Magazine show. We so appreciate your expertise and so appreciate your information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Emily, you're funny. Are you talking out of your nose again?